How do you take a vision and turn it into reality? You start at the beginning. You build until things come alive. The building turns into becoming. The becoming begins to transform. And now you've reached the moment when you become the movement.
Because I don't want to just preach to myself. So y'all ready to help me out tonight in passion and excitement for what the Word of God has to say for us tonight? Let's go. Tonight, I'd like to read to you out of the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 8. We're going OT tonight. The Word of God says this. I'm picking up in verse 4. Then all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah, said to him, "Behold, you are old." It's nice. "And your sons do not walk in your ways. Now appoint for us a king to judge us like all the nations." But the thing displeased Samuel when they said, "Give us a king to judge us." And so Samuel prayed to the Lord, and the Lord said to Samuel, "Obey the voice of the people in all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me from being king over them, according to all the deeds that they have done from the day I brought them up out of Egypt, even to this day, forsaking me and serving other gods. So they are also doing to you. Now then, obey their voice. Only you shall solemnly warn them and show them the ways of the king who shall reign over them." I'm going to skip down to verse 19. But the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel, and they said, "No, but there shall be a king over us, that we also may be like all the nations." Ding, ding, ding. If you get someone to talk long enough, they'll eventually give away their intentions of why they want what they want. We want a king to be like everyone else. Why are we always trying to be like everyone else? Why are we always trying to fit in to the people that we were supposed to be different from? Why are we trying to fit in into the systems that we were supposed to be set apart from? They say, so no, we want a king. We want to be like all the other nations, and that our king may judge us and go out before us and fight our battles. And when Samuel had heard all the words of the people, he repeated them in the ears of the Lord. And the Lord said to Samuel, "Obey their voice and make them a king." I'd like to give you guys a word tonight that I'm titled, "The King We Didn't Need." The King We Didn't Need. You guys can have a seat. The king we didn't need. Y'all ever, you ever chase after something you didn't need? Oh, you guys are so honest. Good. I thought you were going to be all churchy and it was going to be all quiet. I thought you guys were good Christians. Shoot, you go after stuff okay, good thing I got this message. I don't know whether we should chalk it up to greed or just maybe an overactive imagination. But when I was a kid, I would daydream, and this is kind of embarrassing to admit, but I would daydream about like, and this is when I was like 8 or 10 or so. I was like, what if I could like build myself the biggest house, and it was just my house, and I would have this mansion, and I would write out. I'd take paper and I would write out like a floor plan, like a blueprint of my ideal like mansion. And it would have, there were like TVs coming up out of the floor, and there was like secret passageways that would go to like my pool room and my game room. And I had like a gym for some reason, like an 8-year-old bench pressing. I don't know. I had a gym. I had like probably like a sauna. I had all this stuff. It was, and I would draw it out and I would daydream like, man, what if I had this? And then when I was in middle school, I started playing music, and I started getting into music gear and guitars and equipment. And if you know, that can just be like a black hole for savings. And so I would get like Guitar Center catalogs and Musician Friend catalogs. And for our Gen Zers in the house, a catalog is basically like a paper book that comes in the mail. Okay. And it has all these things in it that you could buy. And instead of like buying it online, you would fill out this little card and you would like check off what you wanted, and you would mail it into them with a check. And so I would take these catalogs, and I would daydream to myself, pretend like, man, what if I had just like 20,000. It was always like an absurd amount. Like, what if I had like $30,000 to spend at Guitar Center today, and I would fill out everything? You know, I'd get like 20 Les Pauls, get a couple Taylors, I get like a live sound system, I get all these lights. Like, why is a 14-year-old daydreaming about just this excess of stuff? But this isn't just a commentary on the pastor's materialism. Okay, some of y'all are like, who is this? What is happening? But follow me here. God has been pressing on my heart the damage that can be done in our spiritual lives and in our faith by the desire and the perceived need of things that are not God. And not just materialism, not just greed, no, but like reliance, but hope, but desire, but trust on anything other than God. And so contrary to what some of you might be expecting tonight, I actually don't intend to talk a lot about reverence. I'd like to instead build on that by expanding and talking about something that God has shown me that can damage our faith and that can do damage to our reverence and to our belief in Him, to our passion, to our understanding and experience of God, and how that can be hindered, and just the hit that our faith can take, and the damage that happens when we blur the line between need and want. So this story in 1 Samuel is a major turning point in the narrative of the Old Testament. It's a switch from the time of the judges to the time of the kings. This chapter right here. And if you're not really familiar with this, the Old Testament, well, Exodus tells the story of God delivering His people out of slavery. Joshua tells the story of them inhabiting the land that was promised. And Judges tells the story of what happened once they were actually in the land. And if you haven't read Judges, there's this paragraph that the author wrote in chapter 2 that pretty much perfectly summarizes this book. Chapter 2, verse 16, it says this: "Then the Lord raised up judges who saved them out of the hand of those who plundered them. Yet they did not listen to their judges, for they whored after other gods and bowed down to them. They soon turned aside from the way in which their fathers had walked, who had obeyed the commandments of the Lord, and they did not do so. Whenever the Lord raised up judges for them, the Lord was with the judge, and He saved them from the hand of their enemies all the days of the judge. For the Lord was moved to pity by their groaning because of those who afflicted and oppressed them. But whenever the judge died, they turned their back and were more corrupt than their fathers, going after other gods, serving them and bowing down to them. They did not drop any of their practices or their stubborn ways." So then we get to the book of 1 Samuel. And Samuel, although he was a pretty good judge, by this time we read in chapter 8, he's pretty old. And so the elders, the people of Israel, they come to him and they're like, "Look, enough is enough with this. We want a king. We don't want this judges system anymore. We want a king." The thing is, Israel was founded as a nation by God, for God, in a specific way in which He would be their king, in which He would be able to lead them, that He would be the one who fights for them, that He would protect them, that He would give them the direction that they need, the vision they need. He would give them protection and prosperity. He's the one who would do it, and everything that they needed and everything that they were now trying to look to a king for was actually supposed to be in God all along. And so the people of Israel, they're supposed to be led and they're supposed to be governed by God. Instead, they choose this man to become their king. And so out of this moment and out of this desire comes the election of Saul, King Saul. And, we talk a lot about Saul and his faults. But Saul was actually a pretty good king, especially in the early days. And he was a good leader, but he was a bad follower. Which goes to show that you might think that God just wants you to charge and take initiative and just do things all the time. But that's not necessarily the case. Because sometimes Saul did too much when God said no. And so sometimes God will ask you to be patient, ask you to wait through a season. And if you think God just wants me to go when He's already told you to wait. And so this was the problem with Saul. He was a great leader. But ultimately his problem was that he wasn't a good follower. And he couldn't follow God. But this is the beginning where he's first chosen, he's coronated. And so they choose this man who has all this promise and all this opportunity, despite the warnings of what would happen. Because I skipped over a few verses, but Samuel gives them this detailed list of everything that their king would do to them, and essentially the consequences of what a monarchy means. Like, this is just straight up. Okay, he's going to take you to war. He's going to take your land. He's going to tax you. He's going to take your sons and your daughters, and they're going to be his servants. He's going to demand whatever he wants from you, and you're going to have to deliver. This is just what happens when you have a king. And even though they're fully warned, they still make the choice to have a king. And it's interesting that God lets it all happen. Because God doesn't hand out curses, he hands out consequences. Come on, somebody. So God, in this situation, is like, look, you can turn your back on me, everything I was supposed to be for you. You can forget about all of that. But here's what's going to happen. And it's not even a punishment yet. Like, this stuff, that's not punishment. That's just consequence. That's just what happens when you have a king. And so sometimes, man, we'll start blaming God, or accepting our perception of punishment that he's given us. Like, God is punishing me in this thing. But the truth is that God doesn't really give out curses. He gives out consequences. This is what happens. And so, yes, his mercies are new every morning. And every morning you wake up, you have new mercy from the King of Kings. But that doesn't mean you don't have to deal with the consequence of the mistake you made the night before. You got mercy from your Father. But you might also still have consequences. And so begins here a long history of consequences for God's people. And it's not just one bad king, it's generation after generation paying the price for these people's desire for a king that they didn't even need. And the king they didn't need wasn't just Saul, it was also David. It wasn't just Ahab, it was also Solomon. It wasn't just Herod, it was also Josiah. They didn't need any of them. God was supposed to be their king all along. Never at any point did they need. And so I think it's easy for us to read 1st and 2nd Kings and be like, wow, what a disaster, which it is. But we forget that disaster was predicted in 1 Samuel 8. God says, hey, this is not going to go well. And the people say, do it anyway. It's what we want. I don't have points for you tonight. I have kind of sections. So can I give this message to you in 3 chapters? If you're taking notes, you can write this down. Chapter 1 is when we replace. When we replace. Because on the surface here, what's going on is the elders and the people were replacing the role of the judges, which was fair. The elders asked for a king out of need, right? Because the judges were not working. We just read that passage. And Samuel's sons, it says, they're not faithful. They're evil, which is sad. But, Samuel was raised by the previous judge Eli, and Eli was a good judge too, and he was a good man, but he was a bad father. And his sons were wicked, and they were evil, and they were manipulative, and they were corrupt. And for the record, if you have kids that are naughty, that doesn't necessarily inherently make you a bad parent, but God actually critiques Eli in the sense of, he says, he knew his sons were doing evil and he did nothing to stop them. And so now we have Samuel, whose sons are also evil. And so look, the people can see that this is no good, and it didn't end well with Eli. And they're seeing, hey, this might not end well with Samuel. And they knew how it worked, so you can't really blame them for being worried, and yet still this request for a king is more than that. It's more than that. They're not just trying to replace the system of the judges. They're essentially trying to replace God's role for them, because that was who he was supposed to be. And I want someone to notice in here tonight that they didn't actually reject God. They never say, we don't want the Lord anymore. We don't want Yahweh anymore. They still wanted him as their God. They just wanted to keep him in this box as their supernatural deity and then replace his role as king with a man. Y'all with me? Earlier, at some point last year, I bought this group of crew necks on some wholesale website that came from China. And I was looking into printing stuff on them. So I bought like 6 or so. And I bought like large and extra large. And then they came in the mail, I got them. And The extra larges that I intended to purchase came in as smalls. So I was like, oh. So I emailed them, hey, I think you sent me the wrong size. And they emailed back, oh yeah, we didn't have any extra large in inventory, so we sent you small. Okay? That was the email. And I was nice, y'all. I was nice because I worked in customer service and I know how it is. But I was kind of like, no, it's not okay. I just always think, okay? I was like, no. Like, that's not even close. Like, small to XL, that's not even similar. And I got to remind someone tonight that the role of God in your life, it's not interchangeable with other things and other people. The role of God, it's actually not exchangeable at all. So contrary to popular belief, the seat that God desires to occupy in your life and the authority that he asks to have in your life, it's not interchangeable with anything else. And so often, we will replace God's seat and his authority with whatever else we happen to have on hand, with whatever else makes us feel better, and we just go with it. Like, yeah, this is okay, right? This is close enough, right? No. It's not ever even close. And so this message, this isn't just about kings. It's not just about leadership. It's about everything that you use to fulfill and occupy the space that God is supposed to have in your life as your ruler, as your authority, as your Lord, as your God, as your king, as your sustenance, as your peace. So it's not just about leaders and politicians and kings. Yeah, it's the king you didn't need. It's also the drink you didn't need. It's the high you didn't need. It's the boyfriend you didn't need. It's the car payment you didn't need. It's the stocks you didn't need. And there is a serious danger with trying to replace God in your life with anything else. And when you do so, you will inevitably blur that line between what you need and what you want. The very fact that God gives the people a king, even though it wasn't what they really needed, he still gives it to them. That should tell us something about the way that God interacts with our foolishness. It should tell us something that he knew that wasn't what was best for them, and he gave it to them anyway. And man, some of us are running around so flippantly asking God for everything we can think of. Man, we're asking for God for it without ever taking the time to think, hey, does this actually align with God's word? Does this actually align with God's direction for me? And we'll be asking God for everything we can think of and building our mansion and checking out our catalog without ever thinking, is this actually, and sometimes we'll even ask for things that contradict what God has already told us. Israel did. They had everything God promised them. They had the land. They had the law. They had the promise. They had him, and yet still they desired other things. And the people here, they don't ever stop to think about if they actually even really need a king. They just know they want one, and so because they want it, they need it. And sometimes, even for us, man, who are so blessed beyond what we could ever hope to imagine by the gift of the Holy Spirit, we still blur that line between need and want. Did you see what God says to Samuel when they're having their interaction? Because Samuel's bummed, right? Because he's like, man, they don't want me to be a judge anymore. They don't want my sons. And God says, they haven't rejected you. He says, they've rejected me from being king over them. I want you guys to see this. See this in the character of God here, that God considers reliance on anything other than himself to be the same as rejection. What we see here is that God considers reliance on anything else other than him to equate to rejection. What I mean by that is that the people of Israel, they were not completely rejecting God. They weren't like, forget him, we don't want him. They still wanted him in a picture to a sense, but they wanted more. But they wanted something different. They wanted to be like other nations. They wanted a king to lead over them and not have God be their king. And God says, that's the same thing as if you didn't want me at all. That if they don't want me as king, they don't want me. They don't want who I'm trying to be for them or my plans for them. They don't want me at all. What this shows me, family, is that I can desire to have God in my life, sure. I can desire for God to be in my life. A few hours each week because he makes me feel better, because he helps ground me. And maybe I do believe in him, and I do want him to be some part of my life, but maybe I don't want him to be all of my life. Maybe I want him put in there somewhere, but I don't want him everywhere. I don't want him touching every aspect of my life. I don't want him taking up every day. And what this shows me is that if I just want him for a few hours a week, man, I can want him for a few hours on a weekend, but then my Thursday, Friday, Saturday night still rely on alcohol to make myself feel better about the job I don't like, instead of bothering to ever go to the source of my Creator to tell me about my purpose, to tell me why my job isn't satisfying me the way it should. See, so I might not be fully rejecting God, but if I'm looking to anything else than him to tell me about myself, to provide comfort to me, peace to me, sustenance to me, what God is saying here is that is the same as fully rejecting him. Because hey, look, if you don't rely on me, you rejected me. I'm not just a part-time nanny for you. I'm a full-time God. There's this, man, and Jesus took this next level, y'all. There's this time that these people were trying to follow Jesus as his disciples. And he tells them something funny. He's like, hey, before you come and follow me, you need to count the cost. Like, if you were going to build a house, you wouldn't start building if you didn't know you had enough money to finish it. Otherwise, you just look dumb. You have a half-finished house and you ran out of money. This is the point Jesus makes. So no one's going to do that. First, if you're going to build a house, you sit down and make sure, okay, do I actually have the dough to get this job done? And Jesus says it's the same with following me. Before you follow me, you got to sit down and think. Count the cost. Are you willing to give up what it takes to follow me? And this is hardcore, and sometimes people were like, I guess not. There was another time that people were trying to follow Jesus, and one guy was like, I'll follow you, Rabbi. And he's like, well, okay, but you got to know that I don't really have a home. I'm on the road. I don't have a good supply of food. And the guy's like, oh, shoot. And then there's another guy who says, okay, but I'm going to follow you, but I just want to hang around with my family because first I need to take care of my family, and I have to wait till my dad passes. And Jesus is like, you got to leave that behind if you want to follow me. And then to another person, he says, no one who puts their hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God. So this is real stuff, man. This is real, where God in 1 Samuel says, hey, if you don't want me as king, man, if you don't want me at all. And Jesus is like, look, it's all or nothing. Are you willing to give up what it takes? Otherwise, don't start. And y'all, I don't know, man. If I'm preaching to no one else tonight, I'll tell you guys right now, I'm preaching to myself. Because I might have the title of pastor, but I can still fall into the trap sometimes of trying to feed on other things, trying to gain my balance on other things, of trying to recharge myself on media or entertain myself to a place of contentment and happiness through sports or travel. Or I can fall into the trap of hiding insecurities behind clothes, behind fashion, behind skill, behind abilities. But what God has been just relentlessly pressing on me for the direction of our house churches is seeing God for who he really is. And that even if you want him in the picture, but you want to also rely on other things, or be like other people, or have other people see you a certain way, you got to know the scripture says, well, that's the same as rejecting God altogether. Ready for chapter 2? Chapter 2 is when we add. I've touched on this already a bit, but my biggest takeaway from this passage is that the people weren't fully rejecting God. They were actually trying to not just replace his plan for them, but they were trying to add on to it. They were trying to add stuff. They were trying to add something that wasn't in the recipe. My wife and I have been married for almost 4 years now, and we've been together for over 7. And some point when we had one of our first Thanksgivings, I decided that I should be the man of a house and bake a turkey, which I always thought was really complicated, but it turns out it's really not. And the first turkey I ever made was really good. And so I'm really competitive even with myself. So you can pretty much guarantee that if I was good at something the first try, I'm just gonna like continuing to do it. It's true. So I kept making turkeys each year, and I learned things. And I've learned things about what makes it better. And so I know it's February, but if you need help with your turkey in 10 months, pull out your notes. I know you weren't taking notes until now. Get ready. Okay, lesson 1. Basting is a lie. Okay. It's a lie that your grandma taught you, but it doesn't help. You want the skin to be like crispy, right? And so why would you pour butter over it and make it mushy? What you actually want is you want the butter to be underneath the skin so that it's in contact with the meat, okay? Y'all louder at that than like 5 minutes ago where I was talking about God's provision. Come on with the butter. So, okay, so what you actually want is the butter to be under the skin in contact with the meat, right? So then the meat actually gets all moist. And half of you are triggered by that. Sorry. The other half are just still confused why I'm talking about turkey. But hang on, okay. Okay, I'm going somewhere, making a point. Okay, so I discovered this online, right? And it was totally a game changer. So I blend the butter with garlic and rosemary and sage, salt and pepper, all this stuff. And then I take the skin and I put the butter underneath the skin. So each year I was doing this, it kind of just kept getting better and better. And then 2 years ago, I was like, you know what? Butter is the key to this whole thing. And I don't know exactly how much I used, but it was like an obscene amount. Like every inch of that thing was covered in butter. And believe it or not, I used way too much. And it was actually the worst turkey I've ever made. It was terrible by far because it ended up, all the butter obviously just melted. And then the turkey just baked in like 4 inches of butter, which sounds good, but it's not, because then the bottom was just all like gooey and fell apart, and then the top was overcooked. And I think that sometimes, as Jesus followers, man, we'll take something good and we'll add more and more and more and more until we're drowning in something that was supposed to just be a highlight in our faith, and now it's basically the main course. And now my arteries are clogged with like 3 cups of butter when I was just trying to have turkey and potatoes, and now my contentment is confused because I've filled myself up with worship music and podcasts, and I've neglected the still, quiet whisper of God's voice in the silence, and now I'm not even hearing him. And I'm full of what was supposed to be an additive, a side dish, and I took more and more and more. And sometimes it's things that we didn't even need in the first place. Sometimes it's things that we needed just in moderation. And we add more and more, trying to make, the faith appetizing, trying to season it, trying to make it more interesting, trying to make it more modern, trying to make it easier to swallow. And the problem is that I believe that the more we add, the more we actually dilute it. And so we'll try and, spice things up in our faith by adding what we didn't actually need more of, or maybe what we didn't need at all, and we end up watering down the gospel. We end up watering down the power of God. We end up diluting the mission that we were sent on. I'm trying to tone down a little bit on my criticism of the church because it's not always helpful. And for the record, I love the church, man. I wouldn't be a pastor if I wasn't. But I like looking at big picture stuff. And I've been thinking about the church, since Acts till now. And it's no secret that the movement is one of our primary missions is really to return in some ways to the early church and to get back to some of the things that they had. And I've been thinking about, the early church and the history and years to where we are now. And it's crazy, man, looking back at just how much we have added. It's crazy looking at how much stuff we've added. And not all of it's bad. Not all of it's bad. Actually, a lot of it's good, right? So we don't actually want to be exactly like how the church was in Acts 2 or Acts 4, or exactly how the people were for sure. No, they were still corrupt. They were actually kind of still racist. So no, we don't want to go exactly back. Growth is good. Progression is good. And God said, so some of the things that we've added to the faith, a lot of the things we've added to Christianity, a lot of it is really good. Thank God for our better understanding now of Christ, of the Trinity, than they even had 2,000 years ago. Thank God for the Council of Nicaea. Thank God for the Reformation, for Martin Luther. Thank God for the progression of music in the church. Man, everything from Gregorian chants to the progression of hymnody and Isaac Watts and all the way to Chris Tomlin, to Hillsong, to Mav. Thank God for that. That's good stuff. And so we look back over the history of the church, and there's been a lot of good added, but I've been thinking also about maybe some of the things we've added that we don't really need. Maybe some of the things that we've added too much of. Things that were always good, but now we've let them take center stage when they were supposed to be on the side. And again, not all of it's bad, not all of it's sin. Not all of us has set us back, but maybe we don't really need it. Maybe we didn't really need a king. Maybe we didn't really need a cathedral. Maybe we didn't really need stained glass. Maybe we really didn't need that big screen. Maybe we didn't really need those lights. Maybe we didn't really need to do those things to make people feel good just so they would come into a church service and we could say the attendance was higher. Maybe we didn't really need that degree. Beyond just church issues and history and all of this, the way that we've, distorted our faith at times, this concept of adding versus subtracting, man, this is such a good life principle for every believer. This is so good because so many of us all the time, we're just thinking about what we need to add. That's our go-to move. What do I need to add into my life? And yeah, sure, maybe there's some things you need to add. But so many of us, we're man, if I need to get my life right, or if I'm just trying to get back on track, I'm just thinking about what I need to add to my life in order to get there. Well, what am I missing that I need to put in? But I want to ask someone tonight, what do you maybe need to subtract? What do you have that you don't actually really need? What are you asking for? What are you desiring? What do you have an abundance of that maybe you don't? And I wonder if there's some of us in here tonight who wouldn't benefit from asking God the question, God, what do I need to subtract from my life? Not, God, what is my next blessing? God, what is my next mission? What's the next thing you have for me? What's my next revelation? But God, what do you need to take away from me? Man, because we'll be out here, we'll be out gossiping to our friends about our friends. We'll be out drinking too much on the weekend. We'll be out here addicted to pornography, and then we'll be like, man, I just need to get myself right. I just need to go to another Bible study. I got to go to another worship night. I just need to read a new book. I got to get a mentor. I got to add. And it's okay, those things aren't necessarily going to hurt you. But what if what you actually need is to subtract something from your life? What if there's some stuff going on in you that you don't need? And then you're just trying to cover it up with something spiritual, to cover it up with a spiritual supplement so that you don't have to deal with the root issue. And that's exactly what they were doing in 1 Samuel. Their problem wasn't just that they did or didn't need a king. The problem was that they actually weren't following God at all. They were having all these problems with the countries around them because they hadn't followed God's instruction. They were having all of these wars and these battles that they couldn't win, and God wasn't helping them because they weren't worshiping only him. They were worshiping all these idols. They weren't actually following the laws and the direction that he had given them. And so that's their root issue. It's not whether or not they have a king. It's that they're not even worshiping God alone. Y'all know the 10 Commandments? They weren't even keeping the first one. They were stumbling on commandment number 1. And so they're already worshiping idols, and they're struggling because of it. But then they try and cover it up with their perceived need for a king. And so instead of actually dealing with their root issue, they're like, you know what we need? We need something else. We need to be like someone else. We need to be like everyone else. We need something new. And their problem wasn't that God gave them a broken system. Their problem was that they weren't living within the system that God gave them. And then they try and cover it up with something else, something that they didn't even need. And we'll do the same thing. And we'll do the same, and we'll try and cover up an area of our lives that is depraved or that is broken or that is hurt, that is lacking. And instead of asking God, is there something that's already in my life that is contributing to this? Our go-to question is always, what can I put on top of this? What spiritual Band-Aid can I find to cover? Meanwhile, you leave the thing in your life that is causing the disease. You leave the thing in your life that is causing the issue, that is causing the rot. And then, before long, you have something that was never inherently bad, never inherently wrong, but then you've forced it into a place that doesn't belong. You've taken it and you've multiplied it and you've added up too much, just too much, in an effort to try and cover something. If we are all sufficiently convicted, can I give you chapter 3? By your groans and mumbles, I'll assume that's a yes. Yes. I got news for you, because chapter 3 is God redeems. God redeems. So when we replace him, when we try and add on to him, see, look, God allows them to have their desire for a king because he already has a plan for how he's going to restore it. Yeah, this is so good. So he warns them that it's not going to be good along the way. Like, this is not going to go well, and it doesn't. Even though he knows their dream will be distorted, he still has a plan of how to redeem it. Because God was supposed to be their king in the first place, right? And so after allowing them generations of terrible kings, eventually one day he does in fact retake the throne that he was always supposed to sit on. Enter King Jesus. And so we're talking about all these things that we've added into our faith and we didn't really need, and maybe things that we've mixed in to be with Jesus. But what you find is that by putting Jesus first, it's actually him who can be added into all the other aspects of your life. Y'all, it's so good. I'll say it again. What we find is that instead of trying to leave everything, just leaving everything and following Jesus, I'm actually proposing to you that a life of following Jesus involves bringing him into every aspect of your life. Bringing him into every area. So look, by saying that being a Jesus follower means leaving everything behind. Look, I'm not saying you should leave your family. I'm not saying you quit your job. I'm not saying you sell your house and become a sidewalk prophet or whatever. I'm not saying that any of that is inherently bad. I'm not saying you need to stop going out to dinner or enjoying a good meal, or you need to stop surfing because it's a waste of time. Like, no, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that when you follow Jesus, he becomes a part of things in places in your life that you didn't even realize that you needed him. And so instead of adding other things to Jesus to try and make him more palatable, you need to add Jesus to everything else in order to see its purpose. Come on, somebody. And so now when you bring Jesus into your life, when you follow Jesus with everything you have, then he has a seat at the table with your family. And it's not like you need to leave your family in order to follow him. You're inviting him in, and he becomes a part of the growth and the culture and the direction of your family dynamic. And what's happening is that before you follow Jesus, you might not have even realized what you were missing. You didn't necessarily even realize that he was missing from what you bring him into before you follow him. Like before you sold out for Jesus, you thought you were having the best surf session you could ever have. But then after you follow Jesus, you find out just how much better it is when you paddle out into the waves saying, "Thank you, God. Speak to me today while I enjoy the beauty of your creation." It's so much better. And you didn't ever realize what you were missing until you bring Jesus into every area of your life, and he sits on the throne of your life and has a part in all of it. And so watch this. When our eternal King, okay, the Creator, comes to earth as the God-man Jesus, the Jews already have a king. Actually, they're an occupied nation, so unfortunately they have an emperor, Caesar. But they also have this phony king. His name is Herod. And so when Jesus comes to be the King of Kings, there is no throne vacancy. There's no opening. Like, there's no open spot for a king. They didn't need him. In fact, Herod is so threatened by the fact that people are claiming baby Jesus might be a future king, he commits genocide to try and prevent that from happening in order to try and protect his own throne. By Herod's eyes, they didn't need another king. And so when Saul is coronated in 1 Samuel, he becomes the king they didn't need. When Jesus arrives, to many, he's still the king they didn't need, but now it's different. They didn't need Jesus to take the throne and to take the power like all the other kings. They didn't need Jesus to enforce the laws and to build up the temple and to gather gold. They needed him to become the slain lamb. They didn't need a shepherd to come and boss them around like all the other kings had before. They needed a shepherd who would become the lamb that would be sacrificed and slain and claim the throne forever in a different way. Y'all stand with me. I'm closing. Help me close out right now. Where's my worship team at? You don't always notice what you're missing until you experience it. You don't always know. And God sent me here to tell someone tonight that whether or not you realize you need Jesus, whether or not there is a throne vacancy in your life, whether or not there is a spot for him to occupy, whether there is any place for him to move in authority in your life, it might be time to clear a spot because the King is here. And he's here with authority, and he's here with passion, and he's here with grace, and he's here with purpose, and he's here with love, and he's here with direction, and he's here with abundance, and he's here with life, and he's here with answers, and he's here. He's here with calling, with provision, with purpose. And maybe you didn't realize what you were missing. But you've got a king at your door tonight, and he's knocking. Maybe you don't have a space in your life. Maybe you don't have an open throne for him to sit on right now, but I'm telling you, tonight you got a king at your door. Do you need him? Are you willing to see what he is able to do for you? Do you want him? Are you ready to let him in? Will you bring him in and seat him on the throne of your life, of your intentions, of your desires, of your dreams? There might be someone in here tonight who has never made that decision. Maybe you've heard about Jesus, maybe you've been to church, maybe you've read parts of the Bible, but have you ever made the decision to open the door of your life and allow Jesus to come in? Have you ever made the painful decision to dethrone whatever it is that you've put so much value on? Whether it's yourself, whether it's your dreams, whether it's your career, whether it's your finances, whether it's media, whatever it is that you have put, have you ever made the decision, the painful process to dethrone to go against and take down and tear down the false idols and the altars and the high places and the things that were never supposed to be on that throne, so that you can open the door and let Jesus in. And there might be someone in here tonight who has heard about Jesus, who has thought about God, but you never made that decision. And I want to tell you right now, your coronation ceremony for your new king is as simple as saying, Jesus, I believe you, I want you, I need you, be Lord in my life. And in he comes. But until you open the door, he's standing outside. And he's not knocking down the door yet. And he's not forcing his way in yet. You got time to let him in and make the decision, man, I don't think I needed that king after all. I think I need this king. I don't think I needed that addiction after all. I don't think it ever helped me. I think I need this king. I don't